Bonjour tout le monde. Hello. So there are some wonderful, and I love doing activities like this because you think you know what you're going to get, and you're like, I kind of want a couple of nuggets to segue into the presentation, but there's a lot of unexpected here. But it's wonderful to see that words like care, long-term, challenging, and difficult, certainly that has come out of our study findings. And essentiel, primordial, words like that. So we're definitely, I think, and it's not a matter of being on the same page, but getting into the groove of this idea that we're not only preparing future teachers, but we are supporting and developing future teachers through many, many different phases of their professional careers. I will introduce myself while Cam is going over there. I'm Stephanie Arnott, Associate Professor. Rewind. Associate Professor, University of Ottawa, Faculty of Education. Moi, je parle bilingue aujourd'hui. C'est une présentation en bilingue, alors on le fait de cette façon. Ma collègue Cam va se présenter avec le micro.
Testing. OK. Bonjour tout le monde. Je m'appelle Quand. Je suis un doctorant à l'Université d'Ottawa, and I'm also a FSL supply teacher in the Limestone District School Board.
And our presentation today is not the exact title of the project that we've been working on since 2019, but you'll see that one of the high-level findings is around the idea of retention. And when does it begin and in what ways can it be fostered is really many of the central pieces. Alors, cette présentation, ça va être bilingue des différentes façons. On a des diapos en français, on a des diapos complètement en anglais. On va présenter en français, on va présenter en anglais. Vous pouvez participer dans la langue de votre choix. You can participate in the language of your choosing. And did I miss any? Oh, the quotes that you will eventually be looking at were direct from participants in the language in which they offered them. So we are bilingual in many different ways at the moment. Pour commencer, we definitely feel a land acknowledgement is in order et on va le faire en français. Alors, nous rendons hommage au peuple algonquin, gardien traditionnel de cette terre. Nous reconnaissons le lien sacré de longue date, l'unissant à ce territoire qui demeure non cédé. Nous rendons également hommage à toutes les personnes autochtones qui habitent à Ottawa, qu'elles soient de la région ou d'ailleurs au Canada. Nous reconnaissons les gardiennes et gardiens des savoirs traditionnels de tout âge, et nous honorons aussi leurs dirigeantes et dirigeants d'hier, d'aujourd'hui et de demain au courage indéniable.
This is my slide. So we just want to give a quick shout out to our interdisciplinary team, our cross-country that came together to help us with this project. So starting in the east, we have the team out of the University of New Brunswick, Paula Christensen, Carla Colligan, José Leboutier, Joe Dix, and Lisa Michaud. In the central region, you get Steph and I today, but as well Mimi Masson and Amanda Batistusi. And finally, out in UBC, we have Micah Vernica and Valias Spiliotopoulos.
I love that there's mirrors. It's kind of like that. Let's see if this works. All right. So we're giving you a second dessert first. Instead of giving you the findings at the end, we're giving you them at the beginning and throughout, and then we will round back to them at the end, just so that repetition is not a bad thing. Basically, one of the things that we found, and it was interesting to see that it didn't come out necessarily in the very quick Slido that we did, is that sometimes there's this preoccupation or assumption that retention starts after FSL teachers are hired. And in fact, it became abundantly clear in the data that we collected that it starts earlier than that. I would venture a guess that it starts as soon as they enter any kind of FSL language classroom in Canada. But for the purposes of this project, that it starts upon entry into an FSL teacher education program. The three bullets you see underneath are different gaps. I suppose that links to the title of the project findings that we're going to look at in a little more detail during this presentation. So first, we have the idea that human and material resource gaps plague the system. The system we're talking about is the teacher preparation pipeline that we're going to talk about a little later. And what's interesting about that, many of you in here are longtime stakeholders in FSL education, teacher education. That's not going to become shocking to you. Many of these findings will not be extraordinarily shocking, but what is provocative is the idea of, in this point, that human resources are extremely important. We're not just talking about strategies, websites, textbooks, but humans to support each other during the FSL teacher preparation process. Secondly, we saw in the data an overt need to shift from a deficit-based to a development-based orientation, particularly when talking about language proficiency. And you'll see a lot of quotes related to that in the handouts and what we're going to talk about at our tables. Et troisièmement, l'enseignement des langues et la formation des enseignants doivent être un processus relationnel. Mentorship, collaboration, cooperation were all central pieces of what current and new FSL teachers are engaging in order to, quite frankly, survive in the field of FSL. And we feel that it's something that should be supported in order to thrive. So that would be what's coming straight from our data. And the conclusion, catchy conclusion, but is very real, is that we can't keep recruiting into a leaky pipeline. And we're mentioning that in terms of the shortage in particular, that a lot of emphasis is on recruitment, which is validly so. However, these findings poignantly show that it's leaky once they get in, if they're not retained and supported, and all those wonderful words that were up on that Slido, that there's a desire to leave and that they do leave the profession. So I want to orient all of this without saying that this is not bad news bears. We are not here to make you feel awful or bad or that there's no hope, because we actually see this très clairement comme une opportunité. This study gave us what we're terming a warning shot across the bow to pay attention, because it was very difficult to get through the findings without having this front and center. So in fact, in the report that is going to be coming out in March officially, but we're sort of teasing a lot of it right now, is the contextualization of this entire data set in what we're calling the avalanche. Now, this term came out of some research assistants on the project talking through the data and trying to isolate what somebody asked earlier. What are the factors for retaining teachers? And in fact, every time teachers were talking about, and school district representatives and faculty of ed representatives, which were our core participant base, every time they were talking about what they do, what they want to do, it was as if, and this is what the research assistant said, they were just facing this mountain of systemic challenges like the ones listed on the screen: isolation, marginalization. What else do I have here? Institutional apathy, nobody understanding how FSL works, or some pretty central ones. So for us in the data, it is actually, we see this, and the participants saw this, as no longer on the sidelines. Again, those of you familiar with the research, this is not news, but it's usually reported as a side factor, kind of like an interfering variable. It's front and center in this data. So if we're going to respond to the chronic shortage of FSL teachers in Canada, our participants, and we echo them, their voices, we feel that it should be front and center. Meaning we take it seriously and we don't ignore it, and we actually think about ways to change it. So again, opportunities. I'm going to hand it over to Cam maintenant pour parler de l'étude en général et puis les données, qu'est-ce qu'on a fait pour ramasser les données.
Oui, exactement. Merci, Steph. Donc, on a dans notre étude 3 objectifs: d'examiner le développement des enseignants de FLS et des facteurs qui influencent le recrutement et la rétention en poste. On a de considérer les trajectoires des enseignants depuis l'admission à les programmes de formation jusqu'au apprentissage et leur pratique professionnelle. Et finalement, de considérer les moyens de mieux aider des enseignants à réussir dès le début de leur carrière. So as Steph already mentioned, I'll just really quickly give an overview of our data and our participants here. So in the 3 regions, you can see them broken down by the provinces. So each team was in charge of a different set of provinces. So the Atlantic provinces, central from Quebec to Saskatchewan, and then the West, Alberta, BC, and the territories. We had 3 groups within each of those. So we have teachers, we have school board administrators, or folks who work primarily with those, as well as in the East that crosses over with often with their ministries of education. And finally, we had faculty members and instructors from different faculties of education in those institutions. So our first data point was a website scan. So we scanned all of the Faculty of Education websites across Canada looking for who has an FSL program. And then we had a systematic review of how long is their practicum, how many courses are there in French, how many courses are there about French teaching, these sorts of details. So you can see the total there in each region. We identified 44 programs in total across Canada. That does include private and the religious-based institutions as well. Then we had a survey. So we had 253 responses to our survey, as you can see, broken down across our different folks. So each participant group got a dedicated survey that was unique to them, but with some opportunities for us to do some cross participant group comparison. So this asked them for their experiences from admission into their programs, how their hiring was like, and now we're initially looking at new teachers within the first 5 years, but we had some very passionate, more experienced teachers who started to fill out the survey and really wanted to participate in the project overall. So ultimately, we decided to just roll it out with them as well and to keep that going. And then finally, we also had a number of focus group discussions, again, within each of the participant groups to using the preliminary findings from the survey, particularly that focused on language proficiency, on mentorship, and on professional learning across the pipeline or the timeline of their careers. And so I'll just give you a really quick intro to what we mean when we say that teacher pipeline. And to start with a bit of a sad statistic here, that even though all of the folks who responded, all of the teachers who responded are still practicing, were still involved in their schools, 56% of them were still indicating when asked that they were considering leaving the profession for one reason or another. So this is our most passionate, this is our dedicated who are still feeling this, the effects of the avalanche, who are feeling this burnout. So not just those who have already left by the time and couldn't fill out this survey, this is those still in the field. And so this is our big 5 groups of what we meant when we looked across those categories. So on peut passer des heures à parler de chaque étape et les résultats, mais so we have looking at what is happening before their introduction to teacher education. So what were they doing in their undergrad? Or for more mature students, what was their life experience that's leading them to consider a career as an FSL teacher? Then we have the admission process. So all of the things that went into submitting to a university, getting into the teacher education program, all of those sorts of hurdles, I guess, or the steps to take that through. What was their teacher education program like? After the end, what was the graduation and that transition period as they were sort of handed off gently or abruptly from their teacher education program, and then their first years in the profession and their professional learning experience. So when we talk about recruitment, these are the sorts of things that we were seeing, that a lot of aspiring, lots of passion and motivation to become an FSL teacher leads them through these initial stages. However, there are also certain teachers who came in later who were already certified in another subject, who then took an FSL certification, or folks who weren't intending to be FSL teachers who have been assigned or volunteered for FSL positions with or without an actual certification, language proficiency test, or any other support. And then finally, thinking about our leaks in the pipeline here, that ultimately we lose a lot of people before we even begin. We know, no surprise to anyone in this room, that the reputation of core French, of FSL, of being a French teacher is already a deterrent before they think about applying. We also heard a lot about the testing processes that a lot of universities and teacher education programs are putting students through, that was ultimately a factor in, I don't want to do this. This is too much. I can do this later, thinking about, they know that French teachers are in demand, and if they can be hired without a certification, or if they can take the much easier one-course FSL certification later, why would I go through 2 years of teachers college in French? Then again, we have this experience in teacher education where we're losing students, that there was not a lot of course information, courses dedicated to French, using French, developing their language and their pedagogy to be a language teacher. Oftentimes that was only one course that they're receiving. And is that enough, do we think, to train these teachers? And again, that content, if it's integrated or if it's just that one-time standalone course, checkbox, now you're ready to be an FSL teacher. And then finally, of course, the flip side of the reputation is being unsupported, having those negative early experiences lead to those first 5 years that we see in the research is really key for retaining teachers. And later on, many of our more experienced teachers complaining about a lack of professional learning available to them in their schools, in their boards, or having to seek all of this out themselves, and having no community as an FSL teacher are all factors in their retention. We had divided our study into sort of two big factors here. So this is where our statistical data came in. We look for correlations across all of our surveys with the question of, were they considering leaving the FSL profession? And so these, our push factors, were those that were statistically significant tied to the more likely to leave the profession. So having insufficient IT teacher education courses to prepare them for the practicum experience, and a separate question for the profession, both were statistically significant. If you felt unprepared with the amount of course preparation you received, you were more likely to consider leaving. Same again, looking at the hiring stage. If you are feeling unprepared to answer the pedagogy questions or to respond to questions in French during your hiring interview, or you felt like you were unprepared when you went through that experience, you were more likely to consider leaving. A lack of in-school or local FSL professional learning was also tied to that retention, most of them praising the more national opportunities and things like CASLT that are offering these opportunities, but at the same time, this is not happening in their schools, and they're looking at all their other teachers who are receiving this. And interestingly, as a more demographic question, as tied to this, simultaneous people who identified as simultaneous bilingual speakers who grew up speaking both French and English were more likely to consider leaving than those in French immersion who took core French, who were identified as francophone. So this was interesting. We don't know how to interpret this yet. And so this is just an interesting anecdote on that one. And on the flip side, encouraging folks to stay. So on this one, these were significantly correlated with more likely to remain, answer yes, that they wanted to stay. So being a part of more professional organizations. Hello again, CASLT. So yes, CASLT, ACP, OMLTA, the BCA, TML, all of these, if you were a part of more organizations, the less likely you were to say you were going to leave. Again, signing everyone up for 6 organizations probably won't change that. So correlation, not causation. Yes, but thinking about being prepared, we see the correlation there. And ultimately, those who identified, we asked a huge list and had an other checkbox, how many reasons for what drove them to be an FSL teacher. So those that selected more options were more likely to want to stay despite their challenges. And again, as a demographic factor, elementary teachers were more likely to consider staying than middle school or high school teachers. Yes. Yes, we definitely asked quite a few questions about mentorship. Those didn't come up as significantly related to retention, but yes, there were definitely questions about that.
In the survey, however, in the focus groups, and I think it's important to say, again, we're only focusing on a slice of the data, but it's not to say that all participants said nothing is happening. So whatever you're doing in your particular context, it's there and it's heard and they're engaging. I think there's whenever talking about a desire to do more, or when talking about what is happening, there was always this yes, but, or yes, and that's really what we're trying to highlight here, as that it's an excellent start, but there's more that can be done.
So those were tied together. It was tied together that you wanted to leave FSL or to leave the profession. So yeah, it could be that they were leaving teaching altogether. In the comments, we saw people sort of specify that, no, I'm fine teaching, I just don't want to be an FSL anymore.
But
versus I'm done here completely.
And some anecdotes though did surface that if I do my teacher education in FSL, I don't have that flexibility to move around because of the need. So there's a lot of how do I say, things happening on the front of saying, you come in with FSL, we're going to get you to commit to staying for 3 years, 5 years. Yep. And so then they feel like, okay, maybe I do want to move around, but I don't have that flexibility. So there's things happening on that front too, that even if they do want to leave French, it's very difficult for them to do so. Just a reminder that on the Slido, as Cam said, there is a Q&A part that you can ask questions about the study. And if we have time at the end, is it happening? Okay,
There are a few already.
lovely.
Thank you.
Do you want to take 5 minutes to do that? Because then we can get left, or are we, what do you think? We can look at them. How about we'll look at them while you're starting to talk? Sorry, this is on the fly, classic teaching. Okay. And what we wanted to do today was really get to this idea, and this is in the citation from the draft report, of the findings showing that our collective willingness to see and believe participant experiences. So to us, that is one of the number one steps, is to actually engage with what the participants have been saying. And then collectively respond to them is integral to determining the extent to which future FSL teachers are compelled to stay and or leave. So retention, again, is at the forefront. It emerged at the forefront of the study. So we want you to engage with what they said, all different kinds of stakeholders from all different parts of the country. Again, and I don't know if I mentioned, I had it in my notes, the statistical differences between regions, between geography and so on did not emerge. So this is something that's not just unique to one province. It's across our entire data set, regardless of where the
Yeah, just to clarify that, it was across regions, across demographic profiles, across FSL teaching programs. So there was no difference core immersion, no difference between the provinces or these necessarily the years of experience. So that was quite interesting to us, that these sort of anecdotal immersion teachers might have it better was not a factor in their retention.
In the data. So, la rétention commence avant l'embauchement, pas après. You'll see some quotes that support and sort of contribute to that understanding. How have your understandings of FSL teacher retention shifted? Or just tell us what you talked about that moved your group, let's say, or was resonated with all of you. And then talk about first moves, because again, this is not the only conversation, yay, that we'll ever have about this. This is an ongoing thing. There's lots more findings to share, lots more conversations to be had. Okay, Cam's at that end. Yeehaw. I'm over here. We're going to flip-flop back and forth so that we can get through the next 15 minutes and have everybody hear everybody. Because one of the integral things from our report was that it's not about pointing fingers, but it's about listening to the experiences of others with that idea of the avalanche. That is what's going to do it. Because if all we say is it's, HR needs to do this or the Faculty of Ed needs to do that, it's not as simple as that for anybody and everybody in this room. So I think listening is the first step. Okay. So I'm going to hand it off to Laura, and I am going to be that person with the timer. So 2 minutes.
So we didn't get very far, but we did think that that it has a lot to do with the administration of a school, for example, and Philip and I both have examples of awesome administrators, school directors, or principals who have really great leadership skills, and then they value all subjects being taught, including French. So leadership is important. We also thought the idea of this growth model, so include programs in the BEd program that encourages language learning throughout their program, and then making sure, not sure exactly how, but that's up to you to give recommendations, that mentoring is an ongoing process once you've been hired as well, because teachers don't come set and ready to go. They need to continue learning. And this is what we teach in the BEd program and want to see in the schools.
Just as an interesting point, these conversations bring up, so when I heard Laura say, there needs to be more language proficiency development support throughout, the first thing that came to my mind was the avalanche point about human resources, because in our data, it came out very clearly that there are not a lot of professors to teach in the teacher ed programs. There is not a lot of space of time in the program to insert language development support. So again, that idea of the app is there for everybody in different ways. So I think a collective sharing of this kind of experiences will enable us to be creative, like Joanne said in our discussion earlier.
We talked a lot about the need to value French at all levels. And so that would start, of course, in the classroom level, what the students are experiencing as students in the program. And getting in touch with these students early so that we can be nourishing those intrinsic motivations for learning another language, learning French, to hopefully then carry them into a passion for potentially teaching. And then once they're in the classroom, once the teachers are in the classroom, we talked about how it would be important to develop competencies for, I guess, like a lifelong learning mindset. So if you're making a mistake in front of your students, it's not the end of the world. Correct yourself, show your students that you're correcting yourself, and move on and be that model of perfection isn't the goal, but continual development is, and sort of modeling that for our students all the way along, and sort of therefore instilling that in their learning experience as a student so that they could carry it on in the future as well as FSL teachers on their own.
I really like how the last speaker mentioned something about passion, because that came up in our discussion as well, that you can't necessarily teach passion, you can show passion. So as FSL teachers, we didn't experience some of those feelings of isolation or disappointment or all that ourselves, but we chose that career and we're very passionate about that from a young age. Some people aren't choosing that career as their passion. So that's one thing that really jumped out at us that, seemed to resonate. The other thing that we thought about a first step would be to shift our professional development focus from building capacity amongst FSL champion teachers, which we often do. We often gather our department heads, our curriculum leaders, our strong teachers, and we offer them PD, to shifting that professional development focus to gathering the new teachers to FSL and giving them that time and energy, investing in them, because those who are already champions are going to seek that out generally on their own. And that leads us into what we're doing with the ACP conference in a couple of weeks. We did reach out to our NTIP and our new FSL teachers first and gave them priority access to register for that conference. And we're also offering the language support classes through Premier Class for our teachers who feel linguistic insecurity. So those are just some of the things we think we're hoping are helping our newer to FSL teachers in our board stay.
Okay, here our table, we discussed about the lack of resources. So in terms of, awareness of the relevance of learning a second language, and she mentioned something like, feel alone in my profession, so there is no contact or support from others, and she needs even to provide her colleagues with a kind of support or resources, because there is no one responsible for that. And also the perception of French as second language. In terms of, I can say, identity, there is a big problem in there. And if you want, I have a PhD thesis about that. Why the identity is like really the crucial point. And I think it's related to all this avalanche we are talking about. And I love this weather problem, extreme issue. So you have here that the students who just said, oh, who cares about French? We don't care, and that I don't need to learn it. There is also a kind of a background on the parents. Sometimes they do not encourage them or the kids to proceed the learning of the second language. And even the adults, allow me to open a bracket here. When I was teaching Statistics Canada staff, I got one, a monsieur, oh, I need a B+, I need a B+, I talk to you, and he came over every day. I said, oh my gosh, my goodness, so motivated. But once he got B+, he gave me a bottle of wine, by the way, because he tried it 3 times and he did nothing, and with me, he got it. He came and said, I don't need to speak French anymore. I said, what the heck is going on? You just put it's 800 or 1,000 now? $1,000, let's say, in his pocket, and now, okay, French is dead, is over. Do you know? So this kind of awareness of the culture, of the passion, and I think everything it's about is there. It's situated on the way you related or you conceive these, second language. It's not a folkloric language, it's your language. We are in Canada. So people needed to realize that. I came from the Northeast, from Brazil, to write a thesis in my 4th language. And imagine, I was the first to put my feet in the Morissette library, and the last one. People was like, oh, Maria, you are still here. Go. So it just to put another perspective in terms of report with the language, awareness of the parents, and even principals. I was a teacher at a, not a bilingual, but an English school, and believe me, it was so frustrating to hear the principal saying, like opening the meeting with French teachers hide there. It's like so cold. I don't know your perception, but it could be so sympathetic or very nice to say bonjour tous, like, no, was like, hi, let it start. So it's something that I think it should be worked in terms of to be this, awareness is missing everywhere.
Merci.
In administration, everywhere.
J'adore. Merci énormément. Passion. It makes me think of one participant when they said, "But no, that's all right. It's all good. We're here to share." A participant that said, and talked about still being passionate. And I thought, oh man, like that's, and so, but they were, very, very, very invested in staying. So it was very good. Prochaine table.
We spoke a lot about how the French teachers, even those of us that are experienced, do not feel valued where we teach. Many of us have an English principal with a vice principal who speaks French, and the principal just says, oh, any questions, you go to the VP for French. So right from the top, we get that message very clearly. All of our meetings are in English too. Communication is made a bit easier, I guess. So we also feel that as a French immersion teacher, that you are asked to teach any subject from kindergarten to grade 12 just because you speak French. So you can teach physics, you can teach anything. This might not happen in every province, but for many of us in smaller provinces, I had to teach grade 10 physics. I don't know a thing about grade 10 physics, but I got some good students to help me out with that one. So how can we make this better? We truly believe that mentorship, when you come into a new position, and it doesn't matter if you're very experienced or not, you need help. You need somebody to be your go-to person. And so we know that CASLT has a wonderful mentorship program. We'd like to see that be built and grow stronger. And perhaps some of our school divisions can use that as a model for themselves. Denis will like this. We truly believe in the DELF. I think there's so much wasted money for having to take these entry exams to get into university. If you want to be a French teacher, the DELF just takes that away. So we need to talk about it and have the exposure. The other thing too, and I'm going to go rogue here, team. In our communities, you might have like les communautés d'apprentissage professionnel, professional learning communities. What we lost during COVID is our vision. What are the visions in each school? What do you believe is the purpose of French in your school? We have to do grassroots again. I think we need to just get back into that and move forward. And the last one is I spoke about it in one of the other classes, we have a build from within program where the Ojibwe and Cree students get to go and they work in a classroom and they get credit for that. And they get to see, do I really want to be a Ojibwe or Cree teacher? Well, why can't we be doing that in French or German or any other language? We need to tap into what we have and stop blaming, oh, it's because of this and the government this and blah, blah, blah. Well, so what? If we do that, we're never going to change. So there we go.
No, we spent a lot of time talking about how not a whole lot of this is new. I think for every category of quote here, we all had 3 or 4 anecdotal experiences that easily could have fit in there as well. So there are problems that have been plaguing second language or language teachers in general for the last 20 years at least that are coming back over and over again. We spent some time talking about the importance of having administrators value language programs, because if not, they tend to sink. And, different schools are really kind of like islands. You can have an administrator who really, really values language programs, and then the program is phenomenal. But a lot of times administrators don't speak a second language, or they don't value the programs, and then they obviously don't succeed. So that was what someone had mentioned about being the avenue of the first kind of step to take there would be to increase awareness or increase the value for administrators of language programs.
Here's something that I don't think anybody has mentioned. That one thing that came up with the group was talking about the this study is one of many studies that was funded recently on French retention and recruitment. So it would be great as like a next step, first step for all the people that got money to study this to come together with their different perspectives and what they found in the different ways that they did the studies and see if there's something kind of on the macro level that could come together out of that. So
the one thing we looked at was also the regional awareness of the different programs. You guys got up there and said undergrad, and I went, huh? Like literally, it's like in Saskatchewan, we enter from high school right into a 4-year education program, unless they want to do a Bachelor of Ed or BA, BEd, all that thing. And then there's specialized teaching programs in different areas. It's like, okay, so I can see the value in promoting the FSL languages in your undergrads, but a lot of ours enter into that education program right off the top. But there's also testing throughout that program. And if you don't make it, you don't make it.
Well, and I think we talked a little bit about that at this table and with others about the idea that the findings don't advocate for no testing at all. It's just that the messages that new FSL teachers are getting is that that's what matters without the development to go with it. Think about that first move. I think there's a lot of digestion happening right now, which is really important to do, and a lot of conversation and shared understanding. And we're excited to continue the conversation in other venues.